Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Friday, September the 14th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for this beautiful Friday. We hope your Friday's off to a great start. We're going to, of course, try to get it off to an even better start, like we do with every one of our shows, because one of our top goals as we do these episodes of the podcast is to help people get into a better feeling place every day. And I'm pretty sure that's the main driving force why we're getting more and more people subscribing, more and more people listening. I mean, Tom, I was telling Wendy yesterday afternoon, the numbers are really starting to grow in a significant way. Since over the last 2 or 3 months, the number of plays per day has doubled. We are currently averaging nearly 500 plays a day. A couple months ago, it was about 200 to 250.
Wow, it's growing really fast.
It really is growing. It's fabulous. It's like, oh, wow, this is so exciting. Can we keep growing at this rate? Oh, wow.
Maybe triple that.
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
If people really start to get the understanding of how much they are creating their reality, how much this is really, we're conscious creators, it's like a very powerful understanding that starts to affect every area of your life. And I think more and more people are realizing they can't depend on their government.
The government? Yeah, right. Okay.
They can't depend on the world situation, that they better look deeper for what's going on here. That's how I feel.
Yeah,
that's how I personally feel.
I could tell, yeah. You gave absolutely no clue about that, but yes. No, I'm teasing you. But you're right. I mean, and that's what I love about this. There's so many people who are, not nearly as many as I think could discover us have discovered us so far. So far, the numbers are fairly small compared to the overall population of people who are followers of the law of attraction. But nevertheless, as they're finding us, they're listening, and we're saying, yay, hooray, because that means the message keeps getting spread. And that's the best part, I mean, I've been talking a lot lately about how when people are tweeting and posting on Facebook or on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, that they were listening to the show, that it's been growing the numbers. Well, boy, it really has been. I mean, the evidence has now become quite overwhelming. And that's because not just of the posts and the tweets, but the energy attached to them. That energy is really just going in places that the people tweeting don't even know about, That's and when we put a show on, it goes out in ways that we don't even know about. We just know that it will because we're always having such a good time, right?
Yeah, always. Pretty much always.
Even when we do the serious stuff. I mean, we do serious topics too. But even when we do that, we still have fun. We still have a good time.
Well, we laugh and have a blast. Because we know that there's no reason to take it too seriously, because everything, if we're really infinite beings, and then we really do have a lot more leeway than we think, and there's
what does it usually say?
This world can seem pretty serious, but
what isn't that what you say? Nothing serious is going on here?
Right. Nothing serious is going on here. I've got little signs around my house of that. But sometimes, like lately, I've been looking at those and going, really?
Yeah, doubt does creep in occasionally, doesn't it?
Well, there's different ways to look at that. Nothing serious. When you're in the contrast, right? When you're in the contrast and you're learning from contrast and you're learning, to make your choices, it can sometimes seem like it matters. It's like,
of course,
I guess it matters that life matters. That we come in here to this earth, and it might be a big play, but it often sometimes seems pretty dang real. And when we're going through emotional pain, for example, it seems real.
It does. Very real. Yeah. And it seems really painful and so forth.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
It's kind of like there was a little piece of a movie that I saw, and I can't say I really liked most of the movie, so I didn't watch the whole thing. But this one scene was such a great metaphor for this, because it was a scene of this couple were kind of doing this little, you can't call it a chase because the people they were chasing was so far ahead that calling it a chase would be a disservice. But they were in Paris, I think it was, and they were on that big circular roundabout that they have in the center of the city, and you could see them from overhead, like they were shooting from a helicopter, and they were part of this little carousel dance. That's what it looks like from up above, right? It's just this very gentle, slow moving dance going around this circle. And then you zoom in on them, and their experience up close is, oh my God, we almost got hit. Yeah.
Yeah, and from the top, oh,
Yeah,
it's like
pretty much, right? Yeah, the perspective is
like
everything.
But
But
it is, yeah.
but when you're in it, your perspective is, oh my God, I'm in it. Ah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 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 and that's a lot what our topic's about today is, oh my God, I'm feeling symptoms in my body. Why am I feeling these symptoms?
Is that
Or
the
how
subtitle
can
then?
I, the subtitle is, oh my God, I'm feeling.
Yeah, you entitled it "Exploring the Psychosomatic Phenomenon," which is an interesting title all by itself. Um, really, it is. Uh,
Well, why?
well, just because exploring the psychosomatic phenomenon, psychosomatic is usually something we associate with. I'm feeling something, but it isn't really there. And,
Oh,
so like there's like a double meaning going on in that title. That's what I was thinking.
right. Yeah, yeah. The word phenomena can mean a lot of different things. I actually looked it up before I put it in there to see all the different definitions of it.
Oh, really?
Um,
What was there like a particular purpose? Why you chose that word?
yeah, I had in there the word connection, and then
Uh-huh.
I thought, it's not exciting enough word. No,
Oh,
so,
hey, we're going
no,
for
but
sensational.
I wanted a word that more described how it has this whole word psychosomatic has an aura about it in our society. I've been reading this amazing book called The Divided Mind by Dr. John Sarno. He's an MD, Sarno. The Divided Mind. It's about the epidemic of mind-body disorders, and I'm about halfway through it, and it's blowing my mind because I didn't realize how much um, mind-body disorders and the whole phenomena of psychosomatic, it has been incredibly downplayed and denigrated and otherwise wiped out of medical studies, medical literature, medical training, and now psychiatric, and even the DMS, which is the main manual used to teach psychologists and psychiatrists about the various ailments, dysfunctional psychological psychiatric processes that go on in the human being.
Right.
They've removed references to psychosomatic. It's like removing any references to climate change from all of the EPA and all these agencies in the United States. The National Park Service can't even talk about how climate change could be affecting our parks. And
I sense a Donald Trump joke coming up at some point, but we'll leave that for the moment.
Well, you're pretty good at those.
Yeah, but this isn't a political show, so we won't do that.
Yeah, but so anyway, the point is that I had no idea that back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, there was a lot more scientists and others speaking about psychosomatic illness and beginning to research it and develop trains of thought about it. And one of the main researchers even said that he was so excited, this was, I think, the early 1900s, was that he could see that within 50 years, this would be one of the dominant branches of medical science.
Oh, really?
Psychosomatic medicine. And what Dr. Sarno was saying in his book, and that it's been anything but that. It's now the opposite. And I thought, why would there be such a huge drive to wipe out this mind-body connection and the willingness to study that and to look into it and to understand it? Whereas in the world of law of attraction, it's basically everything. In law of attraction, we say, whatever you're vibrating inside yourself, your whole condition of your thoughts and your feelings is, of course, going to finally, in the final phase, show up as your health. Mm-hmm. It's going to show up as what your body is manifesting. So if you got ailments, they're coming from some kind of way you're thinking and feeling. And I put in my little description of today's podcast that it's mainly what you're feeling, because as I read more and more about psychosomatic mind-body connection, I'm finding that, it's feelings, but of course you could tie thoughts into feelings all over the place.
They're pretty much inseparable. But the thing about psychosomatic is, I mean, there's a popular phrase that goes with that word in most people's minds, and that phrase is, it's all in your head. and you're right, it is sort of a
Yeah,
denigrating thing.
that's
It's like dismissing. If it's in your head, then it must be dismissed. I think there are a couple reasons for that. One reason is particularly the 20th century, even late 19th, but especially the 20th century, was all about objectivity. And objectivity still continues to this day as a major force in human thought and human practice. The idea that the only way, it's kind of what experimental science is based on. Everything that people make conclusions about within mainstream science has to be based on external evidence and only external evidence, and that external evidence must be reproducible. And if it's reproducible by a bunch of people, each doing it independently, then it's objective. So objectivity becomes a really major part of how not only science works, but how people understand the world. And then there's also a second factor, which it's the world of religion. I'll say it's primarily Christianity, although I suspect it's probably also true for other religions. But while I've studied some of the other religions, I can't say I'm really expert enough to render an opinion in this particular case. However, where Christianity is concerned, Christian teachers for a long time, for generations, have been teaching that you can't trust your inner being. You can't trust any thoughts and feelings from inside, and that borders on sorcery, right? That borders on Satan and the dark, the dark side of existence and all that kind of thing. Wow. So you put that combination together. Who wants to go inside? The moment anybody says, "Well, it's all in your head," is the moment that it truly gets dismissed. It has to be, because everything has to be external. And if you go inside, you're risking eternal damnation.
Oh. You think that's still like an underlying force that's affecting everything?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not as pervasive as it was. Fortunately, there's been a lot of improvement in the way people understand looking inside, regardless of whether they understand law of attraction. I mean, it has definitely improved. But, I mean, I can still see the phenomenon happening, say, with the religious right, on the far right. Oh, my goodness. Anything having to do with looking inside is still frowned upon. Wendy Dillard talks about that. Wendy was raised in a very conservative religious household. She was involved in 2 cults, religious cults.
And they were Christian or something.
Right? They were Christian, very definitely Christian. And, she has talked quite eloquently about how you are taught to distrust any intuitions you get from inside.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so funny, because I was hanging out with this woman from Salt Lake City who was a Mormon like about 20 years ago. And she said that in Mormonism, the key to everything is to be able to listen to your impressions, they call them, that you receive.
Oh, and yeah. And I'm sorry, I kind of painted a broad brush there, because there are a lot of elements of the religious right, and not all the religious right believes that. I'm just saying
Mormonism is really different. Yeah. Mormonism quite different, I think, than a lot of the religious right.
Exactly, yeah.
And so anyway, but when you think about it, like Dr. Sarno, when he has people that approach him. Now he just recently died. He in his 90s, so he was doing this ever since the 50s. Well, he graduated from medical school when he was 1950. Yeah. But he was revolutionary, and he was marginalized by a tremendous amount of different physicians. In fact, his book, The Divided Mind, he has chapters in there by about 5 or 6 other actual MDs who actually have taken up the cause of psychosomatic medicine, but they are still revolutionaries in the whole United States world of medicine. That people who are willing to advocate and talk about and study psychosomatic medicine. But when he brings people to him, Dr. Sarno's has a team. He had a team, and I don't know if it still exists now that he's gone. But so the first thing they would do when a person, they first had to accept the person in their program based on whether they felt the person had a predisposition to believe that their mind, that their thoughts and feelings could create conditions in their body. And if they felt the person had a predisposition to accept that, then they would allow them into the program. And this is generally what it sounded like. And interestingly, the first thing they did is they give a lecture that was well developed, and he has the whole lecture in his Divided Mind book, chapter 3 or something. And he said that a huge amount of his, I don't know what percentage, but a great percentage of his patients would alleviate their conditions in their body that some had existed for huge parts of their life, these conditions, by listening to his lecture.
Really?
And a whole lot of people have written him that just by reading, he has 3 books out, just by reading his books, that their conditions have vanished. Because once they understand and accept, he said it's the acceptance of the fact that your mind and your feelings can create conditions, physical conditions in your body. Then for a lot of people, those conditions start to vanish. They start to clear up and they can completely disappear. For others, interestingly, he brings them into this program and he puts them through a protocol that's created by his medical portion of the program. And then, but it's very psychological as well. And then if they don't respond to that, he has a team of psychotherapists he sends them to. And the psychotherapists are trained specifically in mind-body medicine. So they really help the person make the connections necessary and do the deeper inner work. That the reason why, like I would refer a person to a psychotherapist or see one myself as I'm doing right now is because of deeper things that don't seem to be able to be addressed just by, you might say, changing my thoughts and doing my appreciation journal and doing the different Abraham exercises and things don't seem to be enough. Certain things seem to persist.
Mm-hmm.
And so psychotherapy has ways of going deeper with a person. And it's controversial in the realm of law of attraction as to how much you should be, delving into your past or into these deeper, darker, so-called unconscious or subconscious regions. But nevertheless, he got tremendous success then by the people who wouldn't respond just to either his lecture or his program by sending them to these psychotherapists. So there is a whole world of dealing with mind-body symptoms and conditions, but it's very limited out there in the world. I guess psychotherapy is the main way it's dealt with, because psychiatry has really rejected it a lot. He said there isn't very many psychiatrists who really believe in the mind-body connection. I'm thinking, what? I thought that's what psychiatry was about. And apparently not.
That's interesting, yeah, because there is actually some elements of this stuff that is accepted by science. The basic field of biofeedback. I mean, I don't think there's a single medical practitioner anywhere who would deny that we have direct ability to influence things like our breathing, our heart rate, our brain waves, and so forth. I mean, because people can do it. I mean, it's just so easy for people to do. It's not really in dispute. So given that fact, it's interesting that there's kind of like a boundary line. Like, okay, well, we can control our breathing, we can control our brain waves, we can control our heartbeat, we can control a whole bunch of stuff like that, but we can't control anything else.
and John Sarno, he elaborates on that a lot in his book, because he's been so immersed in that for so long that he really shows how in the various sciences where they draw the line. It's very curious. I mean, it's a kind of book that I could actually read twice probably, because you can really start to understand how science stays away from personal accountability or from believing that that things get locked into us when we're babies, or when our first few years of life, that in our childhood, that things get locked in, that they have a childhood view of that, of what happened. And then, but it's that thing because it was a child that made the decision, and the child was so impressionable because they depended so much on their parents for their entire world of survival and love, that we lock in stuff from those very early years that can then show up in our later years, or even at any time in our life, as a disease process or a symptom, an allergy. And there's definitely various things that John Sarno says are clearly, over his treating of thousands of patients, are clearly psychosomatic. I looked at various things he was talking about, and they're all the things I have. It was like, oh my God, all of mine really are the dominant, like, psychosomatic things. Like I have tinnitus, that constant ringing in the ears. He said that is clearly psychosomatic in, the vast majority of the cases for him, in other words, when in the work he's done. as well as eye problems, ear problems, hearing problems, um, upper neck and shoulder, arm problems, gastrointestinal things, and then, of course, things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, Lyme disease, so many different things that are. And he said, interestingly, that you can go back and look at various periods of history in the United States and find that when a particular like syndrome was happening a whole lot in the general society, and this is also in Europe, he found this especially in Norway. There's one particular study that when a particular syndrome was in vogue, that's when the most people would show up with that syndrome. Like he studied, I think it was in Norway, where everybody was having this thing they call whiplash syndrome, which all of a sudden in tons of automobile accidents, they were finding that everybody was getting whiplash. It was like, and so the insurance companies were set up in Norway to handle that really well. So there was a whole procedure that if you got whiplash, you could go through this procedure and you could get your medical treatments paid for by insurance companies. However, in nearby Lithuania, they found that all the whiplash injuries, that there wasn't that same correlation. There wasn't the phenomenon. In other words, people were having a ton of automobile accidents, but they weren't getting whiplash. And so the country's right next to Norway, I guess. I haven't looked on a map, but so you understand what I'm saying? Like it was very prevalent in a country where everything was set up and it was broadcast that whiplash injuries were really common.
Yeah. That's clear law of attraction, right?
Yeah, law of attraction.
Yeah.
And so, it's just fascinating how so much of all this stuff is a mental, emotional process going on that has a huge relevance to what we take in from our environment, what we take in from our own personal experience mentally and emotionally, and what's in our feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know if that made any sense, but
no, I think it makes sense. It actually ties in with what Abraham talks about, right? Because I don't remember the exact phrasing that they use, but they basically make the point that any and all illness started with what I'll call inappropriate thought. And by inappropriate, I mean thought that runs counter to what one's inner being believes. And when we engage in that kind of thought, Abraham says, what we're basically doing is setting up a vibration that encourages things such as dis-ease or illness to enter and kind of take a place in our bodies. And that's a pretty controversial way of looking at stuff for sure. I mean, medical science would definitely have a problem with that one.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of truth to it. And I would even be willing to bet that it's probably 100% true. Just because I haven't been able to learn how to eliminate stuff from my life. I mean, you mentioned, for instance, eyesight or tinnitus or whatever. Well, I've got tinnitus, and I attribute it to the fact that I was a rock and roll guitarist with a guitar amplifier screaming in my left ear. So I have tinnitus in my left ear. That's to me, that's like a direct connection kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
But by the same token, what was the thought process behind it? Well, I can't say I was playing this screaming rock and roll music because I was feeling good. I was trying to make myself feel good, but the impetus behind it wasn't all that great of a feeling. And was there also a thought process that led up to the damage? Yeah, I think there probably was. And is there a thought process that has occurred since then? Yeah, I can point to that one too. That one really haunted me for a long time because I was dealing with all kinds of negative feeling issues for years until I discovered how law of attraction works. And even then it took me a while to kind of reverse the momentum. So is there a correlation? Yeah, there's a definite correlation. Now, many scientists, people with scientific minds and insights will point out correlation is not causation. And I think that's also got some valid point to it also. But nevertheless, the correlation is very high. In my own life, the correlation between thought process and various situations I've had to deal with is very high. I dealt with what they call irritable bowel syndrome for a number of years.
Yeah, that's one of the ones on his list.
Yeah. I dealt with that for quite some time. And it was painful, let me tell you. Really, really painful.
Yeah.
But what I ultimately realized is that there were two main factors involved, and probably just one, but the second one was more of like a good symptom reliever. The first factor was I was focusing on depressing stuff a lot. I mean, I really was. And by a lot, I mean like 98% of the time, 99% of the time. The second factor was just not being hydrated enough. And I think that second factor is really more symptom related than anything, because when you drink enough water, you clear yourself out, and you're going to, that's where digestive pain takes place, right? It takes place in the digestive system. Your gut is where you're processing all this food and eliminating waste and all that stuff. So it makes total sense to me that you need water in order to help lubricate that whole thing. But is the lack of water the cause of it? Not necessarily.
Right. Or the cure.
Or it's taking it the cure, right. It's a symptom reliever, so it's kind of like taking, an ibuprofen or whatever, or acetaminophen if you got a headache. It'll dampen the pain. But does that mean that it cured the headache?
Yeah. Now, what Dr. Sarno's found is that that a person can go to all kinds of specialists and get everything from injections to surgery to a tremendous amount of pills and potions and therapies of all types, and their symptoms of that or that particular condition may or may not clear up, but invariably, he said, they seem to then manifest it somewhere else in another form. Maybe it shows up as an accident, or it shows up as just a whole nother disease process that shows up. He would chronicle some people who went through 6 or 7 different diseases, from everything from cancer to heart disease, the whole gamut, diabetes, like as they're going out and looking for cures and trying to address their situation, but then it just keeps showing up. I mean, something keeps showing up in their body again and again until, he believes that all his experience has shown that the only way these things ever clear up, these psychosomatic illnesses in our body, is when we deal with our deep unconscious things that are locked in there from childhood, usually. And so, there's a need to really do some work on these things, to really get to the root of it, to get to the cause of it.
Well, plus what he's talking about is another way of expressing the law of attraction.
Yes, it is.
It was reminding me of something I think it was yesterday. I was remembering a cliche that was quite popular when I was in my 20s, particularly. I mean, it's been around for a long time and it still exists today, but around that time I remember just running into it a lot. And the cliche was along the lines of, bad things happen in 3s, or sometimes it was in 6s, depending on the person, right? But it was always, there was a number, it was a fixed number, and you could just count on, if something happened once or twice, there was going to be the 3rd time or the 6th time or whatever the number was that the person associated with it. And as I look back, I realized that was actually an expression of the law of attraction. It was a distorted one because they were trying to say it's due to a fixed number and that it was the number that was doing it. But what they were really describing was the law of attraction. And more specifically, they were describing the law of attraction used in a negative way, used on stuff that we don't want, that we don't like, that doesn't feel good, that involves sickness or disease or illness or death or something along that line. And when I understand it that way, then the cliche actually makes sense now. At the time, I thought it was a bunch of nonsense. And then I would notice, sometimes it would actually happen, and people would say, "See, it works. It's really, really true."
About how things multiply the more we focus on them.
Yeah, but they would express it in terms of a particular number. They'd say, "Well, it's 3, or it's 6, or it's 5, or 7, or whatever." But things always happen in 3s. I heard that phrase a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than the fact that things are going to keep happening as long as you keep focusing on
Exactly, yeah. They never expressed it that way. I don't think they even understood it that way.
Yeah. Well, I have a fascination with psychosomatic medicine, and I have for a long time. I don't really know all the reasons, but I'm finding now that as I'm getting older, I've got a number of things in my body that are not fully responding to law of attraction, in the sense of, well, let me just change my game plan here by, constantly feeding myself with thoughts that will change the way that I look at life, change the way that I look at any condition, any situation. And I've been working with that for 4 or 5 years now. And yet certain things in my life just haven't really, I'm not fully getting rid of them. I've been able to control all the psychosomatic things that going on in my body, but I haven't been able to fully eliminate them. So
you've had a
I was
lot of
starting,
success, but it hasn't been complete, and you're looking for complete success,
right. I'm
understandably.
looking for a complete success.
Yeah.
Well, plus some of the things are not, in a way, I've just learned how to control them. I haven't learned how to eliminate them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, like say condition like candida, which is supposedly underlies all upper respiratory conditions like colds, flus, and sinusitis. And I'm finding that I can do all kinds of things to take my attention off the fact that I'm not even label it. So say I don't even say I have candida. I don't even say I have sinusitis. I say, oh, well, there's that symptom again, but I'm getting rid of that and I'm moving towards better health. I'm moving towards full health. And yet I know that I'm eating a very restricted diet because that's basically telling myself that I really do believe on a very deep level that if I don't eat this diet, those symptoms could come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I try to stray off the diet. I let myself have some of the no foods that I'm not supposed to have. And sometimes the symptoms come back and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get worse. Sometimes they don't even seem to flare up at all. And so I have this really strong belief that it's not the foods, it's the belief system. It's some vibration I've got going on in me. And so eventually I came to see, well, if I don't want to believe it's really the foods, then how is it? What is this vibration? Why is this vibration still alive in me? Which is what's prompting me to read books like The Divided Mind and to come up with and to work with a therapist to see if I can see what these deeper vibrations are that are sort of quote unquote locked into my body. And it's fascinating to see that I, in my life, have had a lot of the qualities that Dr. Sarno lists as those things that are often present in people that end up with psychosomatic illnesses, like people that grew up being overly conscientious or exceedingly responsible, compulsive, the need to have the behaviors of others conform to my own narrowly defined standards, uncompromising perfectionism. Any kind of perfectionism is always indicated in psychosomatic illnesses. And then he says at the bottom of everything are rage. And then he says that everybody has rage that came in there from the time we were really young. It's just anger, emotional pain, and sadness that can be traced back to childhood. Anger stemming from self-imposed pressures to be perfect and good. Anger generated from the pressures of life. Things like guilt, shame, fear, insecurity, vulnerability. So, these kind of things, if I go back and look at my life, there was huge amounts of expectation from my parents and my teachers to perform in a highly, like perfectionistic way. In other words, to really please at all costs my parents and my teachers, and
Sure.
I bought into it. I bought into it heavily, and
well, most people do. That's not unusual there, really.
Right. And that's, of course, why Abraham can say every disease process and every illness is a manifestation of a mind-body connection.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. It makes sense. And now, have you tried applying this specifically in your life yet? I mean, have you had any results, so to speak?
Well, yeah, I had. Well, funny that yesterday. I mean, I've been going out on walks, and when I walk, often as I've mentioned before on podcasts, my psoas muscle on my right side seems to tighten as I walk, making walking more and more difficult. And then that affects my knee on my right side, and then it starts to affect my arm and shoulder on my right side. So the whole right side starts to become limping. Like I start to sort of limp to the point where it was really bothering me. And once I decided, as John Sarno said, that people who just listen to his lecture sometimes begin to let go of their psychosomatic symptoms and often completely let go of them. So he said that the key is accepting the understanding that that psychosomatic things are happening in your body, that you are creating these things through your thoughts and your feelings. And so I said, I went out on a walk with that understanding, and I had virtually no problem, with my walking, tiny little bit compared to the day before when it was really bothering me a whole lot. And I had to stop and stretch a whole lot of times. And I thought, well, maybe I'm starting to really let go of this. Other times in the last several months, I've noticed that when I'm really able to go into a feeling and just really feel it deeply without trying to get rid of it, but just allow myself to be with that feeling and then go back into my life, that certain situations change where I'm not the same level of, say, critical or judgmental or anxious about a situation, like with my partner, for example. And I'm with her, and something that was bothering me the day before is no longer bothering me once I spent some time with this deep inner feeling and just sat with it and was able just to feel into it, breathe into it. And then it didn't have the same impact on me the next time. So I'm finding that I'm in a constant process of evolution. The more that I sort of own the fact that I do feel these things, but so many of them are buried. It seems like they really are, like they're unconscious. I'm unaware of a lot of these feelings. And so John Sarno's method is to get you in touch with them. And so he says various unconscious, painful, and threatening feelings are what necessitates the pain. They are inside you, but you don't feel them. So make a list of all the things that may be contributing to those feelings. And then he says, write an essay, the longer the better, about each of these feelings that may be causing, that may be threatening to you or painful to you. And the longer the list and the more you write, the better it'll force you to focus in depth on the emotional things that are of importance in your life. And anything that when you were a child prevented you from being a child falls into that category and should be put on your list, such as physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, not receiving adequate emotional support, not getting enough warmth and love that will result in anger, sorrow, and pain, or excessive discipline or unreasonable expectations from the adults around us. All that stuff, just unfortunately seems to get locked into us because we're so impressionable when we're kids.
Well, we are indeed. I'm curious. I know that he probably doesn't have a whole lot of scientific study because, like you were talking about earlier, this kind of stuff doesn't get studied at all anymore within the mainstream science. But I'm guessing, does he have anecdotal stories about how people would delve into this stuff and make a huge change in their life and so forth?
Yeah, his whole book is full of that stuff.
It is, okay. Yeah. So that's good because when we lack any kind of scientific evidence one way or another at all, anecdotal stories are great, because they help us to get a sense of, this stuff really does work.
Yeah, and he has thousands of them, and so he feels that and I guess a few things that were, I don't know if they were pseudoscientific or if they were actually scientific, but yeah, he doesn't quote a lot of actual scientific studies. Now, I think Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing a lot of work in this realm, and I believe he's turning it into science. His stuff is very fascinating because he's sort of on the cutting edge. Joe Dispenza was a guy who was in the movie The Secret, I believe, and so he's come right from the law of attraction background, but he's more of a brain scientist. So I think he was originally a chiropractor, but he's spread his realm out quite broadly now, and he puts on these huge conferences now all over the world. And he's working with Greg Braden. I don't know if you know Greg Braden, and some other, now Greg Braden is a scientist, but his background was more like in geology or something. But he really looks into the mind-body connection and the whole realm of, the various dimensions of quantum physics that are affecting us on all these different levels. But I have a feeling that to go to one of their programs would be mind-blowingly fascinating, because they're really on the leading edge of this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and turning it into science with lots of electrodes and all that being put on people's brains,
Right. Yeah. I actually don't think Joe Dispenza was in The Secret. I think he was in a movie called What the Bleep Do We Know?
Oh, was that the one? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where
Gotcha.
he was. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, he was.
And you're right.
He
From
was.
what I have to look into his stuff more. I keep telling myself, you guys start checking his stuff out because I really haven't. But everything that I hear tells me he is doing a lot of stuff, a lot of really interesting stuff. He's taking a scientific approach to this, and that's cool. I'm glad he's doing that.
Yeah, and I saw him in some interviews, say in 2015, 2016, that were on YouTube, and they were really good. But just recently, I just ran in fact, yesterday or the day before, I stumbled on a YouTube piece by him that was from 2018, where he's on some kind of a internet talk show being interviewed, or maybe it was a television talk show, I don't know. But oh my God, the guy has changed so much. He is speaking law of attraction so fast and so scientifically and brain science verified that it's mind blowing. He is making connections. It's almost like his brain is on speed. I felt like, no, it was cool. It was cool to listen to him because he talks the way I do sometimes.
You recognize really a kindred spirit. Hey, that's great.
Yes. The one that people complain to me, like, now, could I say something now?
Yeah, right.
Luckily I've learned a lot about that in my coaching, because it doesn't work to be a coach who talks all the time. Coaches only really are effective if they're good listeners. So
yeah, that's
I'm
true.
learning to be a better and better listener, but I feel like a lot that I've had to educate a lot of my clients about law of attraction, because a lot of them come to me and they just know a smattering of law of attraction, and there's so much to understand about it. And yet a lot of it you have to also just believe. You have to just buy into the fact that these folks that call themselves Abraham are speaking to us from the unseen realm, and that they've got knowledge that's mind blowing to us, and so a lot of it, you just have to sort of believe that there's a thing called the vortex, or that everything is being orchestrated by source. Although there's a lot of other disciplines in life, or ways of belief systems in life, that believe that things are being orchestrated by superior powers or other powers, that are in the unseen realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I highly recommend looking into Joe Dispenza's current stuff if you're a law of attraction advocate who really wants to understand more about the mind-body connection. That is his realm also. So John Sarno and Joe Dispenza are two great people to be studying if you want to understand how your physical condition, your symptoms in your body are maybe being created by your emotions and your thoughts, and how you can begin to alter that. Of course, that's what this whole podcast is about too.
Dispenza, he wrote the one. Didn't he write the book "You Are the Placebo"? Isn't that his book?
He wrote "You Are the Placebo."
Yeah.
He's written another one that came out really recently. I have it in my Kindle books, but right now I don't know if I could find it. But yeah, his most recent book is. I'm really fascinated to read it, because it is his latest. His latest edition, "You Are the Placebo," is mind-blowing to read. It's very, very good law of attraction stuff. And he has scientific case studies in there, like the one I think we talked about on the show of all these men who were taken to this facility for a week. And remember that?
Right. Yeah.
The whole facility was changed. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually a Harvard professor who conducted that study. And I can't remember what her last name is, Dr. Helen something.
Yeah,
Ellen something.
Langer or something.
Langer, yeah, Ellen Langer. That's it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very controversial study too, because it was roundly rejected by the mainstream as being unreproducible, which is really strange. All they have to do is set up a study again. But what the hell? They said it was unreproducible.
Right, and just to tell our listeners briefly what it was is that she wanted to prove that by putting people into an environment that duplicated an environment they had 20 years when they were 20 years younger,
right,
would cause their bodies and minds to go back to that state, and thus affect their physiological processes and their psychological processes in a profound way. And so they set up this retreat facility for a week where these men were asked to go and live as if they were back in the 1960s, and this was the 1980s. So they brought in televisions and radios and appliances and decor and everything that looked like a 1960s environment. And so everything on the television and the radio was programs from the 1960s. The magazines were from the 1960s, and they asked the men to talk about all the things that were going on then as if it was still back then, and to live as much as they could back in that time period. And they found that when they studied these men's physiological processes before and after the retreat, that they literally changed their hearing, their eyesight, their gait, their, men who came in with canes no longer needed canes.
Right.
They played touch football, guys who hadn't played football in 30 years.
Yep.
And so it's quite interesting to see how much the mind is affected. The mind and the body are affected by what we are experiencing.
I think the actual decades were the 50s and the 70s, and I say that because I remember part of the description was that it was President Eisenhower's picture on the wall. Of course, he was president in the 1950s.
Well, I remember that they were talking, that was all about what happened with the Bay of Pigs invasion and what happened with Kennedy and Khrushchev.
Yeah, and you're right. That was part of it. That was 62.
That was 60.
So it was like it was the early part of the 60s. You're right. I think the study was actually conducted in like 78 or 79. So that would be roughly 20 years prior. But that's just quibbling. Really, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But
if you want to be right, Walt, you can be right. I don't really. No, but then they had a control group who, I guess they had probably two control groups, one that didn't go there at all and one that went to the retreat place but didn't, they weren't asked to believe that they were back then. They were just surrounded with all these things like the television programs and all that. And they wanted to see if those guys' heart rates changed and their hearing and their eyesight and all these things. And they found that some change occurred, but not at all compared to the group that were asked to believe that they were living in that time and to actively participate emotionally in believing that they were living in that time. So it just shows you how powerful feelings are when it comes to psychosomatic things.
The one unfortunate thing about the study was that Langer never actually published her data. She only published her conclusions. And that brought a lot of pushback to her because a key component of the way science works is science wants to have independent checking. They want to be able to have somebody else take a look at the same data and say, does that actually add up? And she didn't allow that. What's really interesting to me about that, though, is personally, I think she made a mistake in not publishing the data. I think it was a bad idea on her part. But no one's reproduced the study since then. Nobody's even attempted to. And that's the part that blows my mind. I mean, if you really want to disprove or prove the study, either way, why wouldn't you want to reproduce it? Because studies get reproduced all the time. It's not like, we only did one study and we're done. You can never do it again because if you do, it violates a scientific law. No, that's not the way it works. Studies get reproduced all the time. It's part of the scientific process. So that's why I'm amazed nobody's tried to reproduce that one.
When you read John Sarno's book, The Divided Mind, I guess, or any of his 3 books, you get a real good look at the history of that and why he believes that's occurring that way.
Why is that? What does he say?
Well, I don't know exactly why, but I mean, it's this amazing. There's one of the obvious reasons in my mind, and he talks about it, is the financial incentive to keep the disease process exactly the way it is. There's so many systems, external systems that have been created to keep symptoms being dealt with by external means, like all the different cancer therapies, heart therapies, drugs. I mean, the entire pharmaceutical industry is based on not, wanting to have people believe that they need an external cure for their situation, for their symptom. And if everything starts to turn to the fact that you're creating your own symptoms and that your own bodily conditions are somehow in your control, that's incredibly threatening to a massive array of medical practitioners. And he details the history throughout the United States of how powerfully they've squelched any inroads being made into this mind body work. And it seems to be, is there an active conspiracy, or is it just all happening subconsciously in the whole medical profession, to keep these things squelched? But he talks about some active ways they've actually made sure that that information doesn't get out, and all the pushback he's taken over the years, just a huge amount of pushback he's gotten from his colleagues. And I'm glad to see that there are four or five other doctors who write chapters in the book I'm really anxious to get to that section. I haven't read any of their chapters yet to see what they're saying in comparison to what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty easy to make an argument. It doesn't have to be whether there's a conspiracy, but there is tremendous financial disincentive to engage in studies like this, simply because the money is in the drugs. The money is in stuff that you can patent and sell. And you can't patent a study. There's no way to do that. And you can't patent the results of a study. And you can't patent a behavioral change or a different way of understanding stuff. There's no way to do that. And that's going to control how much money you're going to get for a study like that. So I can see why mainstream science isn't going to put out a study like that. That makes total sense to me. The part that I kind of stop on, though, is there are every year thousands of doctoral candidates. I don't mean just medical doctors. I mean PhDs, all kinds of medical researchers and so forth, pursuing various kinds of advanced degrees. And they're constantly looking for topics for theses, Well, I would think one of them would want to reproduce that Langer study, because it's such a great study to reproduce, and maybe find some new twist on it so they can justify to their faculty advisor doing the study in the first place. But they don't have the same kind of economic disincentive. And that's why I'm a little bit surprised.
Well, if you trace Dr. Sarno's, treatment process all the way to what it really comes down to, it's what we said in the beginning of the podcast, what I was talking about. And that is, and one of the main reasons he feels that this stuff is not pursued is because it ultimately comes down to facing, you could say, these shadow aspects of the unconscious that Carl Jung and so many psychologists have pointed to, which is saying that, there are things that get locked in there from very early ages that are terrifying to us. And to most people, they do not want to dredge up the possibility that there's vibrations that were set up at a very early age that are running their life, that are producing now disease processes in their body, but that they're ultimately because of this unconscious psychological pain. There's the pain associated with these things that happened when we were really young, that people ultimately they don't want to admit that stuff is even there, and they don't want to feel it. They don't want to dredge it up because it seems like that's the past. It's painful. I don't want to go there. Why should I have to go there? Surely I can just take a pill. I can just do a process. I can have lots of affirmations. I can do my appreciation journal. I can do, so many other things. Surely I can deal with this without having to deal with these older feelings, and in my own life,
I love the way you managed to get the law of attraction into the mainstream by grouping it all in the same group. That was really well done.
Well, that's how it is for me. I mean, I'm a law of attraction coach, but I'm finding that if I don't incorporate this deeper vibrations that seem to be running so much of my show, I've got to understand, that those, how do I allow those vibrations to be finally, what's the word? Healed, finally integrated, finally aligned with source is what, all these feelings are wanting to be aligned with my infinite self that is always healthy, that is always aligned. But to get them into that alignment, I have to somehow recognize the process that's taking place there. What's that feeling wanting me to understand about my alignment? And if I don't really deal with that feeling, I don't think I'm going to I'm going to get to the bottom of what it's trying to tell me about my alignment.
Well, one thing I can tell for sure is you're going to get to the bottom of it, because there's been a theme to the topics you've come up with lately, and they all have this underlying theme. That tells me you're putting it out there in spades in terms of vibration, and it also tells me you're probably putting it out there in terms of your deliberate focus on a daily basis. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to come out of it, what the manifestation is going to be, but it's very clear you're pointing in a direction here and getting to a place where you're going to produce something amazing. I'm glad to have a ringside seat to watch to find out what it's going to be.
You know what's happening? Well, you know what's so amazing? I am experiencing more of the law of attraction showing up in my life than I've ever experienced in doing this work.
Interesting.
Really? I'm literally watching things flood, and I'm going to use that word flood into my life, that are exactly what I need at exactly the right time, exactly, just like second I think I need it, it's there.
Very
it's
cool.
It's really cool. I mean, the people, the information, the challenges, whatever it is, it's just like popping into my life. And I feel like I have it's almost like if I had said, Archangel Michael, would you please be assigned to this and take care of everything for me? And like Archangel Michael goes, yes, sir, I've got it all in control. Or you say to God, I really need you to help me with this. Would you send all the necessary things? And it's like, okay, here they are. It's like that, it's
nice.
I wish I was, could do that with money, to the same way, but I feel like it's life saying to me, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
You are definitely on the right track. And this is the work you need to be doing. And you don't, and it's funny how many people around me who are psychologists are saying to me, you're totally going to be fine. You're exactly where you need to be. And they even know exactly where I'm at. They say, oh no, you're in this process. It's a phase of initiation, and you're in this phase, and now you're going to be going into this phase. It's almost like that. I mean, it's like, okay, really?
Well, you're on a journey. That's what you are, right?
That's right.
You're on this journey, and you don't necessarily know where it's going to go, but heck, that's half the fun, right? It's the journey. It's the adventure. And you learn stuff along the way, but the journey is where it's really all at. That's why we ask people to be subscribers to our podcast, because we're on a journey here. I mean, every single podcast with every single co-host is different. So it's always a completely different perspective every single time we do a show. And yet all those different perspectives gives us so many different ways to understand this rather large topic of the law of attraction. So I just want to take a moment to remind and encourage people who are not yet subscribers, please become a subscriber. Really easy to do. I mean, if you haven't already figured out how to do it, just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. The instructions are right there. There's even some links you can click that'll take you right to where you need to be to get that subscribe button. And once you subscribe, you get all of the episodes streaming right to your smartphone or tablet or whatever device it is that you use. And simultaneously, for those who are already subscribers, and we're seeing people doing it, I was going through my Twitter feed today, for LOA Today, and people they're retweeting, they're liking, they're sharing, they're saying, hey, I love the show, and that kind of thing. And it's paying off, because we're seeing it in the numbers. More and more people are discovering it. So please keep doing what you're doing, and do it even more. If you haven't done it, start posting stuff in your favorite social media channel about loatoday.net, because when you do, it gets into hands of people you didn't even know about. And that means more and more people get their daily dose of happy, and that's what we're really all about.
How many downloads a month, you said, or a week? Or
well, we were getting about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we were averaging around 200 to 250 per day. And we're now around 500 per day. We're just under 500 per day. Yeah.
Downloads, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's working out now. I think we're on pace for about 14,000 downloads for the month.
Damn.
Yeah. I mean, this time last year, I think we were hoping for like 1,000 in a month.
Wow.
The growth has been just exponential. It's been fantastic. And we want it to keep going. We want more and more people to find out about it. Beautiful. So anyway, this has been great. And I guess we were out of time, so I'll have to say I look forward to talking to you in a week.
Yeah,
me too. I hope you have a great weekend too.
I hope you have a great weekend and a great week.
Thank you very much. And we also want to invite our listeners to not only have a great weekend, but keep tuning in. And we hope that we'll see you again next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.